Welcome to Champion Minded, the podcast for those who aim for excellence, not only in the sports arena, but in life. My name is Allistair, author, speaker, mindset and performance coach, and my goal is to help you unleash your unlimited potential and provide you with the tools to achieve greatness. Are you ready to become champion minded? Then let's do this. Hey everyone, welcome to the Champion Minded podcast. I'm Allistair, your host. In this episode of What It Takes, I have Tracey Neville. Now, Tracey needs a little introduction. In fact, she was one of the most requested people for the Champion Minded podcast. A little bit about her. She was a former England Netball International and former England Head Coach. As a player, she was a member of England teams that won bronze medals at the 1998 Commonwealth Games and 1999 World Netball Champs. She played for England 81 times. She then became the national head coach, where she led the England team to their first ever gold medal in the Commonwealth Games in 2018. Guys, this was a really, really awesome podcast with Tracey. What I loved about her was her openness, her infectious laugh, which you'll hear as well. But in this episode, we talk about her upbringing in the Neville home, of course, being the sister of Gary and Phil Neville, who played for Manchester United and England. We talk a little bit about that. We also go into leadership, coaching career, her playing career, and a lot more, guys. So I know you're going to enjoy this one. Thanks again to all of you who sent in some questions as well. She answered those. And also at the end, we have some rapid fire fun questions for her as well. So as always, I love your feedback. Let me know if you like this episode on Twitter, Facebook, or on Instagram, guys. This is Tracey Neville. Tracey, welcome to the Champion Minded podcast.
Thank you, Allistair, for inviting me on. I think we both got stitched up to do this podcast, didn't we?
Well, I'm so happy it worked out. And I have to admit, you're probably one of the most requested people that I've had on this podcast, because I've had a few people, especially from your native England there, requesting that you come onto the podcast. So there you go.
Do you know what? Are you sure they're not related to me? I'm going to say I've got a little bit of bias in my family.
Tracey, let's go back to where it all started for you. As we know, you grew up in an incredibly sporty family with obviously Gary and Phil as your brothers playing the highest level of football, or as we say here in America, soccer. Tell us a little bit about your upbringing, how you were introduced to netball, and a little bit about your parents as well, because obviously there was three very successful athletes in the family.
I think growing up, we come from a family where sport was like having breakfast in the morning. It felt that, you know, we grew up with a bat and ball in our hand. You know, there was no barrier to going out there and playing sport. We were often taken to my dad, who obviously played cricket. My mum played hockey, rounders, netball, obviously played a little bit of football as well in her youth. And it just felt it was part of our upbringing. And I felt that all the way through our journey into high performance sport, it felt that they were just the facilitators in us being able to achieve. And sometimes people class parents as trophy parents. You know, did your parents want it more than you? And my dad was an avid football fan. My mum was an avid netball fan. But it was never like that in our family. It just felt that sport was part of our makeup and part of what we did as a group. And a bit of a family connection. I used to go out a lot with my mum. And it was a way me and my mum bonded. My brothers used to do a lot with my dad, and it wasn't just about being with friends and family. It become a huge, like, sort of jigsaw puzzle for us to be involved in sport, and as well the friends and the people that we met along the way. And I think as you start to move up, it sort of becomes like a bit of a funnel system that. You know, you start to narrow down your vision of where you actually want to go. And at the time, my brothers were obviously very talented cricket and footballers, but as they started obviously to move towards that funnel, their focus started to focus a lot on Man United and football. And likewise with me, I used to play a lot of different sports, but it used to sort of funnel towards netball. And you think about the textbook research that you do when you're coaching, and you know, and you look into that. And I reckon we are textbook. You know, you talk about the number of hours that you do a year, the way you come in, the best talented sportsmen either play, many different sports or, one sport of many different kinds in many different environments. And that was generally what our upbringing was about.
Mm. Now, obviously, that you've hit a good point there talking about multi-sports. Now, Roger Federer obviously talks about that he played soccer, he played squash, he did various sports until he was 13 or 14. Do you find today that kids are specializing too early into a sport?
I think there's two variants to that. I think the first variant for me would be that I think there's a lot of pressure put on a child within particular sports, so they feel pressurized to actually concentrate on that particular sport. And then the second variant would be that within that particular sport, there's a big, huge commitment, and there's not a lot of people that work together to be able to facilitate that child's development, because when a talented kid comes through, everybody wants a little bit of a piece of them, and everybody thinks that they're more important than someone else. And that is something that I probably see when I was coaching at club level, that the demands on children these days is huge. So you either see those kids who just specialize too early in a particular sport and they're not led to develop, or you see the other side where they get that much pressure that they actually fall out of sport and lose their love for it because they just can't manage the huge demand that is placed on them. And I think them are the two caveats that are actually happening now within sport. However, I do think that we're getting a lot better, because I think netball went down the route of we'd only take people who played all different sports. Well, I've got friends who made it to international level who only ever played netball. But what they did is they played netball in different environments. And I think it's trying to create them environments for them kids. They played adult netball, junior netball. And I think if they are specialising in one sport, it's about creating the right environment for them as well.
Well, here's the thing that I love about netball, and I'm not just being biased here, because I was brought up in South Africa, which is obviously a Commonwealth country as well. And we played netball at break time against the girls. So it'd be that, we were maybe 12 or 13 or 14 at the time. And, the girls would say, oh, come on, you can't beat us. And we'd go and play netball against them. And
what position were you?
Oh, no idea. Come on, that's too much. GK. I think I was that one.
Are you tall enough for that?
No. I don't think I've grown since I was 13. But, no, but, it's a sport like basketball where it is a multi-sport in a way, because there's a lot of agility involved. There's eye-hand coordination. You get sports that are just, let's say soccer, for example, is very foot-dominated. But netball is a game that requires so many different skills, like basketball, for example. So I was a sports nut back in school as well. I think I played 7 sports. And then at break time, before school, we'd play soccer. Break time, we'd play netball against the girls, and that would always end up badly. And then afterwards, we'd have a lot of sports, for example. So, no, excellent. Now, Tracey, you've coached at the highest level, being the national coach of England, but you've also played at the very highest level as well, winning 2 bronze medals at the Commonwealth Games in 98, I think it was, and the World Championships in 99. What would you say were your strengths as a player, and what do you feel most proud about looking back?
I think my strengths as a player, and I probably didn't realise that at the time, was it was the team element. And I think that's where I started gravitating towards team sports. I needed people around me. I like to say I was a little bit of a cement. And when I look at talented athletes now, I was never one of the mavericks or, the key talented players in the team. But what I did is I seemed to work well within a unit. And I used to facilitate that unit quite well. And I could always, when you talk about culture and playing within a team, and now as a coach, I see them sort of players now that they're actually essential to a winning culture. Those players that do work, you talk about how you work your mindset within that, and you think about working from top down. So you think about what elements you need for your team to succeed. And then the players fall into that. And I progressed myself. I fit well, very, very well into a team, because I know the importance of the people around me for me to be able to do my job. And I think that is really hugely important as a player. And I think that shone to me as a player. Like I say, there was some up and down performances that I used to put out there. but the coaches used to believe in me because if there was a job that needed to be done, I used to follow instructions, rules, and work to the best advantages of that team. And I think that was probably one of my huge strengths. The highest highlight had to be winning that bronze medal at 1998. We hadn't won a huge medal, in a major championship like that for a very long time. And for that to be the first Commonwealth Games and to be my first championships, that was probably the most memorable experience. And obviously, looking at that multicultural sport environment as well, that's the first time I've been in a multi-sport environment. And just to be inspired by them people around me, I think was one of the key moments.
Mm. Now, you spoke about that you were very coachable at a young age. Now, I had a question, I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago on a podcast, from a parent asking, how do I make my kid more coachable? And my answer was, well, probably more discipline at home. Now, would you say you'd learned those traits of being more coachable, open to feedback from your parenting, for example, from the way you were brought up?
Yeah, I think you talk about coachable, and I look at it, there's not a bad coach out there. I hear a lot saying, oh, she's a really bad coach. I think there's a lot you can learn for every single person that contributes to your environment. And I was like a bit of a sponge, I asked a lot of questions. I wanted to know, you couldn't just tell me a drill and then I'd just accept it. I'd want to know why we're doing it, where that was going to impact me on the game.
And that was already at a very young age, Tracey?
Yeah, I was always a why, and my mum always asked me. I was probably one of the most embarrassing children to take into company because I always asked the most random person, where did babies come from, and then they'd say by the stalk, and then I'd be like, well, why? And I'm like, how does it, I'd always want to know like more and more. I was always a questioner. And I think that is something that is probably taken out a little bit of children, that confidence and ability to, there's a lot of hierarchy, and it's how you create a coaching environment. I do it now. I probably do it now with my little nieces. That's some of the pleasure I have got of being out of high performance. I like working with young children. I think you learn a lot from young children about how they develop and how you can practice the acute coaching skills. And I now encourage them to contribute to the session. What do you think you need to work on? Where do you, and then what I do is I don't just listen to it, I actually apply it. So they actually become really comfortable talking to me. What did you not do well in that? What did you not do well in that game? And they'll go, I didn't shoot well. Why do you not think you shoot well? So I asked them to break down a little bit more of their game. And I think that was something that I sort of started to bring later on into coaching. Some of my strengths within that, because I think that's really important that we create an environment where children can actually contribute. And I think the world is going in that way now, and where athletes contribute to what makes them successful. And you try and derive a program around that, because I think you get more buy-in from that. We've all been in that coaching arena where you just used to turn up, the coach delivered, and you went home. But that's an exam. That's an exam process. You go in, you do the exam, come away and retain no knowledge to take you into the future. And I think we need to get a little bit more open within our environments to be able to develop that questioning, because that makes you then more coachable. Some coaches don't like it, particularly older coaches, just do as I say and not as I do sort of thing. But I think the coaches of today do allow more questioning. I do feel that some coaches feel it, particularly from hierarchy players as well, and they can feel it's a bit of a personal attack on them. And so I think it's just being able to find a relationship with them people in different environments. Take them out for coffee so you can have a workable relationship, so that actually when you're in a performance environment and they ask you a sharp question, you can answer it and you're not going to take it personally. I think that is more about coachability of a player.
Yeah, well said. I mean, I can, I can relate to that, because the way I was brought up was, as you just said there now, do as I say. And you'll just say, yes, sir, yes, ma'am. And that was what the way it would be. And I found when I got into the coaching industry early in my early 20s, I found out very quickly that I had to change the way I had been coached, because we tend to want to coach the way we have been coached because that's all we know. For example, it's like parenting. You were brought up this way. Now that's the way you're going to bring up your kids, until you realize, hold on a second, why did we do it like that? Or, you start to question things. But I worked with a player, Kevin Anderson, who was top 5 in the world in tennis 2-3 years ago, played Nadal in the US Open final, etc. Now, If I'd have worked with him 10 or 15 years ago, it would not have worked. I would have blown up because he was a player that continually questioned and asked why. Now, I wouldn't have had that patience 10, 15 years ago. And thank goodness, we're evolving all the time. Life learning is about evolving. If you look back to the person you were 5 years ago, you'd agree that you're not that same person. Things have changed, things you've learned. But, Kevin would question everything. And this is one of the key reasons why he became so successful. He wasn't the most talented player I worked with, and I say that respectfully. Nobody would have rated him of getting into the top 50 in the world. There he is, beating Federer at Wimbledon, 2 Grand Slam finals against Nadal and Djokovic. But he was a player that really improved my coaching ability, my patience of a player that, like you said, would question everything. And that is one of the key reasons. When people say to me, what has been one of the reasons why he's become so good? Is because he questions everything. He knows how many reps you did last week on Wednesday. He knows what drills. He wants to know why we're doing 2 more this week and we didn't do it last week. Now, I wouldn't have had the patience to do that, for example. So the message out there, as you said, to coaches, that players who question and ask why are players that better you at the end of the day, because...
Yeah, but you've also not got to be ignorant of those players who like direct instruction as well. So I think there is a real fine element that because some players don't question you, it's not that they're not wanting to know why or what the long term of this is. And I think there's that fine line that they may be more knowledgeable players and just need clear instruction and understand that when you say to them, we're doing this centre pass because we think it will expose this particular defender. Don't shy away because they've not asked a question that they're not learning as they go, because they may see that visually. They may say, well, I actually understand that by looking because you've shown me that now visually. I don't need to ask the questions, where people don't get that. And I think we go back to them different learning styles that I think there's a presumption that, there is probably sometimes too many questions, but there's that fine line of them more direct questions of this is why I'm doing it, this is where we go. And I think it makes you a better coach as well, because then what you do is you preempt them questions. So you've asked them. So actually when your team go out, you're like, actually, we've got a real generic understanding that when I say we're doing this drill and these are the reasons why, they trust that them are the reasons why. And when we implement it, they then can add to that sort of playbook going forward. And I think that's really important as well about how players understand and how they learn.
Now, I'm going to get onto coaching, but I've got one more question as a player. Now, I want to go back to what you said about being, I asked you about your strengths, and you mentioned one word there, cement, being the cement between the team. What exactly did you mean on that? Could you elaborate on that?
I think there's always a facilitator in a team. There's always someone who sort of connects people together. So you can have, you can only have so many mavericks, and I call them mavericks. They're the people who don't really conform to the team goals. They work off. If you have 7 mavericks in a team, I say that your probably team won't succeed. So around them particular mavericks, you need people who sort of stick to the rules, stick to what the team is focusing on in that game, but obviously complement. So if your maverick goes, if it's, say, for example, in netball, if you go out for a centre pass and that particular centre pass was meant to be landed middle and your maverick lands it wide, that piece of cement then sort of facilitates that particular unit to get you back on track so that you're in a learning and can bring sort of that unit together or connect someone. And I think that's something where I worked really well. I was able to connect. I was a shooter at the time, but I wasn't able to connect. I was able to be that wing attack if the wing attack was marked out the game. And I was able to feed the shooter if I had to play more of a wing attack role. I was able to take on a few shots if I needed to take on a few shots. And I think it's enabled to be able to cover positions, but also so you sort of cement that particular unit together. And I think that was something that I thought was a particular strength of mine, attribute as I went through.
Last question on your playing career. What do you miss most about playing? Not coaching, but being as a player.
Do you know, there's something about being a player, like you say about the banter and the fun. I had so much fun. I was playing, with my friends. And although you're in a coaching, there's a lot of responsibility on you. And there's a level of bit that you're not involved in within a playing group, and that bit I really love. The changing room and the bits off court, that the thrill of walking out with a group of athletes and winning and putting out a performance together, and then coming into the changing room and celebrating that. And even you talk about the last night out. You can't be that person when you're a coach, and I really truly do really miss that sort of relaxedness, that ability to let yourself go, and you don't have, like I say, there's not many times now as a high performance coach you have the environment or the capacity to be able to do that, and that was where probably I excelled a lot.
Yeah, yeah, you're absolutely right. It is the banter, it's the bus rides, it's the meals around the table, it's all those small things. And I think, obviously, having a year like 2020, a lot of athletes and players have realized just what really mattered and what they really missed, right? Because you speak to players and athletes, and they just miss the camaraderie, just being together, and just, as when it was normal times, you'd get sick of each other quite a lot. It's like, oh, her again or him again. But this year,
it'll be interesting to see how that impacts on teams. Now, players are turning up to training grounds. They're missing a huge part of the social element of sport. They turn up, they get tested, they go out on the playing field, they come off and go. And it'd be interesting to see what's happening within the Premier League. Obviously, to see which teams actually do flourish under them sort of environments and which ones really depend on that connection. I personally think the Roses depended on that off-court connection, that fun, being together, being creative, being silly. I think they really depended on that. And luckily they can still stay in that environment. But it'd be interesting to see what happens on club level with these team athletes, and whether individual sports now excel with them being able to train on their own, these individual athletes.
Yeah, talk about a year of accountability, right? Where you've really had to take charge of your own program.
Yeah, exactly. And you're not reliant on anyone else. And I think that's something. But I do think we've found a new way of working. If I thought about me working nationally, I've got players all over the world, and I think actually it's forced us into a new way of working, that actually less time can be spent travelling and on the road, and more time can be spent together through mediums such as has been happening. So I think if you tie them two worlds together, it could be a better world that we're actually living in for sport.
Yeah. I also think it's something that's challenged coaches, because, we're used to the face-to-face connection and dialogue, etc. Now, it's really challenged coaches to, on these Zoom platforms or Microsoft platforms, whatever ones you're using, is to be well prepared, be able to speak well. It's challenged other elements of our coaching as well.
Yeah, and also planning. A lot of coaches work ad hoc. They don't plan a lot. They rely on turning up to sessions and it just going with the flow and working on their own. Where now them ideas have to be shared. They have to put them pens to paper. They have to be able to deliver them in a way that, and explainability. You have to explain a lot more of your coaching methods. And I have to say personally, I've really struggled with the lockdown. I rely on that interaction. I love, that's what I thrive off. And I think, it'd be interesting to see how people come out of that ineffective, whether it's going to work for them or it's worked against them, because they could have missed a whole 12 months of like essential coaching and time with their team.
Yeah, I think I'm the same as you. A people's person, love to be out there. I think that's been the biggest challenge for me this year personally, is not being able to be out there. I mean, I just love the energy you get from it and just the connection. So with coaching, when did you know that you wanted to be a coach? Was it when you were playing? Were you transitioning to be a coach? Or tell us a little bit about your transition into coaching.
So I had a really good mentor called Marion Lofthouse, probably someone that everyone has, that person who seems to be your club coach, who seems to be, who works your high performance area. She was also an England selector, and she made me, I know it sounds awful, but she did actually make me deliver some coaching sessions. And she actually took me through my level 1. So I used to coach. I was only probably about 21, 22 at the time, but she used to make me turn up to high performance sessions for the younger kids at like 15, 16, and coach them regularly on a weekday. And what she did is then she put me through my level 1, and then she put me through my level 2. And then she basically made me take on, and I say make because at the time, you don't have time for this. I was playing, I wanted to have fun, I wanted to get out, but she actually made me take on an under-19 club team. And she sort of mentored me through them actually winning. And that was my first winning, actually. It was my first year, and we won the under-19s national clubs. And she directed me through that. She sat with me on a bench. It was probably not as structured as probably would be today. But, she talked to me about my changes. She talked to me, there was one time in the game I was struggling. I didn't know what was happening. And she talked to me about, what do we actually need? What player do we need out there to get the ball to her? And, that was a real great learning step for me. And I think we paper push a lot of coaching now. And we don't get out there to be able to experience it, and be able to listen to these people. And that's probably the biggest learning environment you can be in. And she created that environment for me. But she also did it because it was a way of me earning money. Because she knew that netball obviously was an amateur sport at the time. I needed to facilitate some of my national career. So it was a way of me earning quick money fast. And obviously to get that, I didn't need that consistency. I could just come in and go. And, now I look at it and I think I was always going to be a coach, even though at the time you'd asked me what I wanted to be when I finished. It wasn't coaching, but it felt that I was always going to be a coach. If you looked, I went back and did my sports science and nutrition. I did my strength and conditioning qualification. I started to go back and do all this thing. And I thought, I'm just building up an holistic coaching career where I've been into different environments. And to be honest, it paid me dividends.
Who are some of the coaches you've learned from, and past and present?
I have to say, England Netball have probably had the biggest turnaround of coaches. We've probably turned around our national coach every 4 years, and I was part of probably one of the most influential, probably 10 years. And we had some massive coaches come over from Australia and New Zealand. Obviously, we had some great coaches within England. So we had obviously White Amaru, we had Lynn Gunson, we had Julie Owenwig, I had Mary Beardwood, Marion Lofthouse. And then what they did is they created many different learning styles for me and different approaches to how to approach the game. And like I say, I was always a questioner, I was a sponge. So it was also about me developing my game, but also about developing my knowledge and understanding the game further. But I think the most influential one I had was when I actually was working as a performance manager at Leeds Metropolitan University, and we were in this one office. And in this one office, we probably had some of the top coaches in England from cricket, volleyball, and badminton, and we had another netball coach in there. And what I did is we used to, over non-associated meetings and stuff like that, we used just to have talks about particular scenarios that are happening in the press, that are happening within teams, were happening within their teams. We used to just banter out loads of conversation. And that was probably one of the biggest learning environments I was in for 3 years. I learned a lot about not only high performance sport, but university sport. I learned about different genders, dealing with women, dealing with men, learning about different sports and bringing how we could tie them in together. But we were also used to do some self-learning. So we used to speak to the group about problems we were having, or we used to talk about a particular topic, and then they used to question us on us. And it sort of put you in that comfortable, uncomfortable environment and be able to bring to the table some of the issues and how other people would view and deal with them issues. And I think that made me probably a really good coach. And I probably miss an environment like that. And I always say they should set up a coaching group, because I don't think there's enough support out there for coaches to be able to, which is protected, that you can actually voice your opinion, walk away and think that's actually a safe environment for me to share that knowledge.
Today, are there any coaches that impress you? And it doesn't have to be a netball, but is there any coaches out there today in professional sports that you say, yeah, she's doing a great job or he's doing a great job? Now, I know there could be many, but is there any that stick out for you?
I have to say Klopp at Liverpool, and that really hurts me to say that from a Man United. Particularly, do you know what I see about him? The way, not only has he brought his team, so you can talk about the on the pitch stuff, but it's the way that he's really enjoying it. He speaks that, I always live from the mantra that, if you love the work you do, you never, if you love the job you do, you never have to go to work. And he just enjoys it. Even when he's under pressure, he seems to be enjoying it. He's quite natural the way he talks about his teams. It's like it's his family, it's a friendship, it's, a way of life. And I think a lot of that has been taken out of football for me because there's such a high turnaround of managers.
Sure. Yep.
The managers don't get to be involved in that particular environment. They don't see it as their home, their family, a part of where they belong, and the fans think that they belong as well, win or lose. And that is really hard now in Premiership football. And I think because I've been brought up with Alex Ferguson and I've seen the way he's driven Man United over such a long period of time, it become his family, it become his home. And that's what I'm seeing with Klopp at the moment. And I think that's what I felt with the Roses, that because I was with them, for 5 years, I felt that that's what that place become for me. And I did actually enjoy it. So even at the World Cup when we didn't win, I didn't feel that any day I'd wake up not wanting to win. Every day I woke up with that team, I felt that we were going to win. And that's how I view Klopp at the moment. And that's because he looked like he's enjoying it. He looks like he's part of that particular mantra, that ethos of that club.
Yeah. I mean, one word that sticks out for me for Klopp is just authenticity. I mean, at the beginning, everybody thought, okay, this guy's like maybe not who he is, but 4 years later, he's still the grinning, likable German, so they say. But I mean, he's done a fantastic job turning around a culture as well at such a big club. So, no, excellent. Now, there's many traits that make a great coach, but if you were to only choose 3, what would they be? I know there's many, so there's no wrong answer here.
I think the first one is take people along the journey. I've made some huge mistakes during my coaching, and I think one of the things is now my open honesty. I feel that keeping information to yourself, not explaining the journey that you're going on, actually can compromise your team. So I think within the Roses, some people don't want to know what's happening. They don't agree with what's happening, but they can't say that they haven't heard it from, they say, the horse's mouth, as they say. And I think that is hugely important, that, if you want to make change, if you want to create success within a team, then I think you have to take everybody along with the journey, and that's those above you and also those below you. And I think that was one of the keys in the Roses, that I don't just want to speak to my players. I want to speak to the board. I want to speak to the CEO. I want to speak to the PD. Everyone is on this journey. It's important that everyone is involved in that, and that is something that I've really hugely learned over the last probably 5 years. The second one is that never stop learning. It's hard. I think one of the hardest things I found within the Roses is that everyone shuts you out of their environment. You feel like you become a very isolated, introverted person, which I'm definitely not. And before that, I was allowed into everybody's environment, and then everybody shut me out. And it's important that I lost probably a lot during that 5 years of being able to go into environments, but that are not environments that are always above me or successful environments. They're environments that, I learn a lot from the club coaches. We've got some great club coaches throughout the English Super League. Going into there, talking to them people, and just going into other environments as well. And I think there's not a lot of time for coaches at the top level to be able to do that. And I think that is really crucial for a line manager to be able to map out what the development of that coach is, to keep them learning and to keep their skills up. And the third thing is honesty. You say about honesty and trust, but honesty is probably one of my biggest ones. I don't lie to people. I think if you start coaching and you're really honest from the start, people really appreciate how you are going to evolve and how the team are going to evolve, and then there's no caveats along the way. And that really helps when you're selecting a squad of players. If you put a process in place directed towards that honesty, they know when it comes to them ultimate final moments where you're making these big decisions, they have an idea of where that big decision or that idea is going to go. I think that creates a really good journey for people. We also, within the Roses, everyone knew what everybody else was doing. And I think sometimes there's a white elephant in the room, and I had to take that white elephant out. That was the one thing I had to take out of the environment, that, this is what this player is doing. This player's not in training today because of this reason. That was explained straight away. So you're not getting to the end of the session and you're still hearing little groups talk about why that particular player is not doing that fitness test. It was always, we went into a meeting, this is where these players are, this is where these players are. And, everyone was just settled straight away. And that's sometimes communication didn't come directly from me. That honest, I was, the leadership group supported me on that, or the captains, and it's, again, involving them within that particular period as well.
So what I'm hearing there is definitely clarity and vision, open and honest culture, and obviously evolving learning as well were the three important things for you there. I put together a new presentation, and it's case studies of successful teams. So, for example, 2016 Chicago Cubs, they broke a 108-year spell, which was the longest ever in a professional team not winning. And one of them was the U.S. women's soccer team under the leadership of Jill Ellis, which I've really enjoyed watching a few videos of hers. And she talks about being direct and not being fluffy. Some players will like it, some won't, but they know that there's brutal honesty coming from you. Would you say that would have been your coaching style as well? Not necessarily brutal honesty, but just being direct.
Yes, I'm definitely direct. I'm definitely a decision maker. People say that when my bucket's full, that directness becomes a little bit more harsh. When my bucket's not full, it becomes a little bit more, how do they say it, a little bit more sugar coated. But I always say, don't ask me what your hair looks like, because you'll see in my face, because I can't lie. I'm not a liar. I'd definitely be honest about that. Likewise, I'd expect that honesty from me. I think the worst place you can keep me is in an environment where there's a lot of unknowns or what ifs. I want that direct honesty, and sometimes that can be particularly hard being a coach at a top level. For people, people see you as an hierarchy, but it's actually that real finding them people who, have that confidence to be direct honesty. And I think what I did within that environment around that honesty was surround me with people that, if people couldn't speak directly to me, they could speak directly to someone else who made them feel that it was safe to be able to come back to me. And there's also that safety around that if someone does speak honesty, it's how you take it, isn't it? Because you might give that back. But I'm not a rude person. So that was also another trait of mine. I was not rude. I was just honest if you asked me a question.
Yeah. Now, one of the things coaches struggling and leaders struggling is having the difficult conversations, having the hard conversations. And it is obviously a massive part of being a strong leader. How did you address the hard conversations or the not so nice conversations?
We did it in two ways. We worked with a real good psychological support group called Changing Minds, and he basically set up 3 key leadership management team, which was myself, the CEO, and our performance lifestyle. And what we did is we were completely different personalities, as you can probably gather. I'm a red, more of a red. We had a bit of a grey and we had a green within that. And what we did is, with them difficult conversations, we come up with a thing where we actually put it onto the table and worked out how we were going to deal with that. Because you're not just, you can go in there and really deal with strict and be really blunt, but you have to understand that you've got a duty of care for people around you when you're dealing with them difficult conversations. And, for me to go in there and just go directly at that particular player would probably, I've learned that that's not the best scenario, because there could be so much other things going on within that particular environment. There also needs to be that particular player has to be supported when you're going in with them difficult conversations as well. So, and you've also got to protect yourself within these days. So sometimes we approached it, myself with another member of one of them senior leader management teams. So we actually we thought them two were the best people to go into that particular environment to deal with that scenario. Or we allowed that person to have someone support them within that, because we knew that person would probably not be able to manage that difficult conversation. So she had someone to be able to take some of that pressure away from them. And the other thing we did with difficult conversations was, they become fewer. They can become fewer and fewer if you create a good team culture. you have obviously behaviours and values that you live up to. So a lot of our environment was managed by our players. So if players or someone stepped outside them, we could pull them back to values and behaviours. So actually it wasn't always myself who were going into them difficult conversations. The second sort of scenario that we did within that was we had a process. So when I was going in, for example, to drop a player or say their fitness testing results were not high enough or whatever we were going in with, and there was a process to that. They weren't just told that 6 months down the line. There was a process that there was a checking point at the 1 month mark, the 3 month mark, the 4 month mark. We had data to back that up. We had performance. So they weren't just gone in and said, right, you dropped, you're done. It was more of a case of, you have been dropped, but this is where we feel, your areas of development, what your work-ons are. These are fields where we feel you're stronger at. Where can we start to work a lot more on your strengths, but add on these work-ons? And I think them were the sort of processes we sort of followed. And it was just, like I say, if you're always having difficult conversations, and I did do at the start of my Roses coaching campaign, I always went into environments where they were difficult, then I feel that you've not set up the right environment. And I think then become less and less with the environment that you create.
Talking about standards and values, who set those within the Roses team? Was that the leadership group, or was it a part of the players as well? Did they also decide on what the standards were going to be?
So the major thing for me was we needed to look at what our team looked like. I wanted a lot of, I've had some really good and bad experience of values and behaviours within a team. Sometimes people work from the bottom up, so they work on individuals. But for me, it was about, let's see what this team needs, this identity that this team needs. What do we need to succeed? And then let's see where our individuals fit into them particular team standards. So we had a great captain at the time, Amma Agabese, and we also had a great performance lifestyle in Helen Alforno, and we worked with, we actually started off with Damien Hughes, and obviously he wasn't able to continue the journey on. And he basically he did the foundations of the players' values. And then what they started to do is we started to work with them changing minds who started to evolve them values. And it was really interesting that we asked our team to present to the England football women's team on the culture of the team. And I've never heard them speak about their culture and their values before. Yeah, obviously know what they are and I look how they adhere to them. But it was really, really good for me to listen to that, because they turned around and said, so many times we're going to a team and we'll go, right, resilient is going to be one, humanity is going to be, they come up with these clear words that are just thrown about all the time. And they said, we didn't want that. We didn't want words that everyone else just threw around that meant nothing. We wanted words that actually meant something to us. So they actually created their own words around their particular values. And the captain was awesome at it. And the team we started to create leaders under leaders. So when they took teams to other competitions, it wasn't just our captain, they started to drive. So they showed different ways of delivering. Like we could stand up and go, these are our values, how do we live to them? But they played games around them. They complimented, they celebrated success of when people had achieved them within the environment. And they they created their own words. They didn't have the bog standard, what everybody else has.
Yeah.
They created their own words and it become part of them. So now, I could probably rhyme them off, but it was more them and their words. They weren't things that we needed to do. But I think one thing that I missed, we obviously created ours as a staff and we created them as players, but we didn't have accountability for staff and players. And I think that sometimes gets missed out. It takes so much time to develop a playing values and behaviours and staff values and behaviours. But I don't know how, I think we missed the link of how we could create them together so that they could speak to me about if I'm not following their values and behaviours. And I think that honesty, I think that's the next step forward.
That's very interesting, because in my first book, 7 Keys to Being a Great Coach, I taught, the very first chapter is about setting your standards or values, if you like. And the first one is the values and standards you hold for yourself, which I think is very important. The second one is the values and standards you hold for your fellow staff members, your fellow coaches, for example. And the third one is the values and standards you hold for your players, for example. So, of course, things like time management and dress code and communication and so on and so forth. But I've never actually thought of it until now, until what you just said now, of the interlink between the coaching staff and the players, that particular that's very interesting. Yeah.
I don't know what that would do to an environment, because you talk about players being able to out other players in a safe environment. I can speak to you, like, a young inexperienced player can speak to an older experienced player, because they're not following the values of that team, and that becomes a really good relationship and a really good, powerful tool to have within the team. But how does a player speak to a physio or a coach if they're not upholding the values and behaviours of the team? And I think that is where a great culture could really start to evolve. And I don't know if there is teams that have done that, and whether there's still that hierarchy within that. But I've been in environments where staff definitely haven't lived up to the values and behaviours, and normally, generally, it's the coach or the higher ones that come down on that particular staff member. But at the time, do a player have a confidence to go to that staff member? That is not in relation to our team. That's not the value of our team and behaviour of our team. So I think that's unacceptable. And and would that be powerful to a team? I don't know.
What did you look for in a captain or a leader?
Do you know, I probably had about 3 captains during my time, and over 5 years, that's quite significant. And I think what we're scared of now is changing the captain to the environment that you have. And at the time when I first started out with the Roses, I needed a player that was really valuable to me off the court, that could really bring in a team, could really be powerful, and didn't need to excel on the court, but people had a lot of respect for, that really listened to, that could really impact an environment. And I think that's something that Amma Agabezi really, really offered me through her particular leadership. She was a people person. She needed that interaction. She had an intelligence where she could knew the power of bringing a culture together, enforcing the values. She could speak to hierarchy. She could speak to less experience, and that was quite powerful for her. Obviously, as time went on, I obviously didn't go on to select her for the World Cup. I selected Serena Guthrie. Well, she was a completely different leader, because at that particular time we didn't have access to all our players. And in that environment, what I needed a leader that led by example. I needed someone that brought the environment up on the training court, that set the standard that, in training, everything is hard. We've got to be comfortable being uncomfortable. We hear that loads, but when we're tired, that she still pushes on. She's still 10 meters above everybody. And we needed someone in that environment at a particular time to bring everybody up to the standard that she was, because we didn't have our best talented athletes in that environment leading into that World Cup. So I think, as a leader, I think it's really important that you're not shy to, change your leadership to suit your environment, because, there's only certain people who can shine on the court and off of the court at the same time. And, it depends where you are in evolving your particular sport and your particular environment. And at that particular time, it was essential that I moved that leadership on to create with what the team was doing and how it was evolving.
Interesting. Let me get your opinion on this. So it was a basketball university I consult up in North Carolina. And on my visitation there, one of the first questions I asked the coaches are, who are your leaders, or who is your leader? And they said, well, we have 2 leaders. We have an off-court leader and we have an on-court leader. What's your opinion on that? Good. Does that work? I mean, Do you
know, I don't know if this is like a co-captain. Like, co-captain is probably one of my peeves. You asked me to look into that, because I think it's a coach that can't make a decision. Personally, when I look at that, I think that's a coach that can't make a particular difficult decision or a tough decision on who is the best environment. And when I look at a co-captain, I think that the actual captain they want is the second captain, but they're not too scared to get rid of the first captain. Does that make sense? So I always think that when I see a co-captain, they feel that they'll upset someone, so they don't want to do that. So what they do is they make a co-captain. I don't know if that's worked in the environment. I don't think I've ever seen anyone lift a trophy where there's been 2 captains on that pitch at co-captains. I don't know. Maybe you could prove me wrong there, Allistair. But that's how I see. I feel that what you're doing is you're marring. You're basically saying to someone, I can't make a decision on this, or I can't make a difficult decision. In respect to on and off court captains, I do think there's a real strength in that as a captain and vice captain, but it's who you think is going to impact that when you come in, who is the biggest decision maker. So I think as traits come, when you do have a captain and vice captain, there is a person within that. So when I think about Amma Agabezi and Jade probably led a lot more on the court, and Amma probably led a lot more off the court. And I think that's sharing responsibilities. I've never actually heard of, we did start to move towards giving other people responsibility. And do you know what? It's actually easier giving people more responsibility in an off-court scenario than an on-court scenario, because that's where they have to make the difficult decisions and they have to say the most pressure things to a group of athletes, and you've got to have a lot of confidence to be able to do that. So maybe that's the migration to off-court to on-court that particularly do. But I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's just how their dynamics work and whether, how do them captains work when they go out and perform.
Also, I want to be respectful of your time, and this has been amazing because I could talk to you for hours. So we're definitely.
Can I ask you a question? The off-court captain, was
Yes.
that one of the starting lineups? Were they in the starting lineup?
Sometimes, he wasn't in the starting five all the time, but he was very, very, very well liked, more liked than the on-court captain, for example. So it was almost like the off-court captain was almost like the peace negotiator and the likable guy, and the on-court was more the demanding, tough, in-your-face type of player.
Example sort of person.
Yeah. So there were two different personalities.
Yeah, but I think you have that, like, your coaching staff. Like, I couldn't have another person as my assistant like me. I think, my assistant coach was very, relaxed, very, people used to be able to connect with her, speak to her, be comfortable with her. And I think that's how you choose your environments. You couldn't have 5 people in the same environment with the same personality. I just don't think that works. And maybe that really worked. Were they succeeding?
They were, yes. I mean, it was an interesting scenario because, I hadn't seen it like that as well. And they play obviously at a very high level. They're a top 15 university in the United States. So it seemed to work, and they, because I have one-on-ones with the players as well. So, they can give me their opinion and so on and so forth. And they felt it worked. They liked it that way. And,
yeah, because sometimes I think that they think it has to go to the best player. It's the way of using the coach's tension, like, giving that play. I personally do not feel that. I feel that sometimes then players have too much of an impact on my team, so I can't make them a captain because that gives them too much. They're like the Mavericks, aren't they? They have too much authority on the team. To give them the captaincy as well would just send my team completely through the roof. So I like a little bit of control within that captaincy, that captaincy, although they have an hierarchy, they're also there to benefit the team and not just themselves individually. And I think that's a fine line.
Yeah. You especially see it in junior sports where they'll make the best player the captain. And for me, that's the wrong message, especially at a very young age, to what leadership is. So I feel it's something coaches can do better is at under 10, under 12 level, whatever you want to call it, is they're explaining what leadership is. It's not necessarily the best player. It's the person who is the best team player, the best influencer, the best, as you mentioned, SMENT, which I love that concept as well. That's a leader, not just the best player. Because now they've got this perception from a very young age that a leader is the best at that skill or playing that game, for example, which is the wrong message to send. I want to be respectful of your time, of course, and I really appreciate this. There's going to be part 2 of this, by the way, in the future, just so you know. Let's have a look now. I had some questions. I won't be able to take all of them, but I've had some questions for you. As I said, you're very, very popular on my Twitter handle. Let's see, where were we here? Where did I put that piece of paper? Here it is here. Interesting question from Mark in Milton Keynes. He says, what are 1 or 2 things you admire most about Gary and Phil? Sorry that the first question has to be about your brothers.
I think it's their intensity. We're a family that when we get on an escalator, we ain't getting off. And I think that is something that I really thrive off with both of them. They're so different. How they apply it, they're different personalities, but the way their intensity and the way they create that is actually a really good journey. It's really good to be around.
It's been a good example of work ethic and all those things. Hi Tracey, I've been a massive fan of yours for some time. Have you thought about bringing out a book? And that's from Jill from Leeds.
Do you know, people ask me to bring out a book. I would be interested in doing a book, but I'm not sure what that book would entail, because would it be a skills book, a life book? I wouldn't know which direction to go around. So I think until I evolve it in my head, I think at the moment that's just a thing in process.
I think your problem is not what am I going to write? It's like, how can I condense this whole journey down? And it's obviously still going.
I think sometimes, like with a technical book, you're outdated as soon as it hits the shelves because someone with new ideas. So that's how I'm always evolving my mind. So that really sits uncomfortable with me. To tell stories from the past, I'm still in the game, and I think them books I don't think are well appreciated at this particular time.
Trust.
So so it's just trying to find a medium where you could write something that could actually impact a netball community, but also be inspiring. Actually put you in good stead. And, there's not many good books out there, obviously.
Yeah. No, I mean, that was one of the things with my first book as well, is that I said to myself, it's about my journey as well of working in Russia and working in all over the world, but nothing negative about people. It's only going to be positive of the good things they did. And if there was something negative, you're not going to mention names and you're not going to mention places. You're going to you're going to get your point across of like, this was not the way to do it, for example. So otherwise, it just ends up in a whole lot of drama. So,
but I think them, like you talk about learning from people. I think them people have made your environment better.
Yeah,
and have enabled your journey. Whereas if you hadn't had that, if you'd had all positivity, I think it would have been a pretty boring experience.
Exactly. No, 100%. There was one more question here, and I'm trying. Oh, there it is, right there. Hi Tracey, I'm a volunteer coach at a young kids small netball club in Christchurch, New Zealand. How do you deal with players who constantly violate the standards or rules, like coming late sometimes or displaying poor body language?
That's sometimes difficult, because the body language one is an interpretation of you being able to do it. Now, we have, if you walked into our Roses setup, there's probably 5% of our girls that look like they don't want to be there to other people. But that is just the way they are. And I think it's just about learning about your players. Lateness is one of my big pet hates, massive pet hates. That's the setting the standard. Generally, if you set up the right environment, that can be dealt with by your players. That's unacceptable. And for me, shut your doors. Training starts at this time. If you're not here, that's fine. There's your gym program. Go and do it anyone else. I think to eliminate someone from your environment and be cruel is not right. But I think the players set the standards on the lateness because it's driven by the coach. However, if they do appear late, don't stop them people training, but you don't get the privilege to train with your team. And I think that's hard to manage when you're young kids, because often it might not be them that's making them late, it might be the parents. And I feel that there is a little bit of sensitivity around that particular topic, because it's not always the child while they're late.
And then the child ends up as the victim, right? When they walk in.
Loads of times where a teacher's sent them running around the thing because they were late and they didn't have any control over it. And that, for me, that's, you've just got to have a little bit of sensitivity around children.
If you can just add in there, coaches that are listening, I know there's going to be a lot of youth sports coaches, running and push-ups, don't use those as punishment and discipline, please, because it just sends the wrong message. Quick story.
I got that a lot when I was younger.
Yeah, so did I. Well, it made me a better runner. So, quick story. When I was 16, I was an aspiring athlete. I wanted to be a professional triathlete, which luckily I did get to do. My flexibility was terrible, and of course, guys hate stretching. Actually, probably a lot of people hate stretching. So I decided to get out of my comfort zone and go to a ballet class for stretching, which was on a Saturday morning in Johannesburg. And her name was Pat Gush, and she was that type of Pat Summit type of person, which I loved. My mom was like that. One of my greatest mentors was my track and field coach. She was phenomenal. They were tough, but they were fair. And I remember I was so nervous to go into the first class. I mean, I was going to be the only boy in this class. It's like that movie, I don't know what it was called, with the boy that does ballet. And anyway, so I purposely get there at 8:30 because I don't want to be there a few minutes before, you know what I mean? 8:30, the door was closed. and there was this little glass block in the door. And she comes. I try and open the door. It's locked. I'm like, well, it's 8:30. And she comes to the window and she points at her watch and she goes like this. And I didn't get in the class. So.
To be fair, we had a coach like that. We used to call it Y time. You know, she had her watch and everyone would sync to her watch. And to be fair, I have left girls. I have driven on a coach. But it actually become quite the banter of the team after, because, you know, when they get to actually speak back at you. And they said, do you remember that time when you left me on the roundabout because we were late? And, you know, you do have a little bit. It's about being able to laugh at yourself as well.
Exactly. Well, I was never late again after that, so less more. Right, last part, and this is quick fire questions. Are you ready?
No,
kind of.
But go on.
Favorite food?
Thai.
Nice. Drink?
Vimto. I do like wine and I do like gin, but Vimto is probably my childhood drink that I can't live without. First thing I get when I get off a plane.
There you go. Guilty pleasure?
Dear me. Going on holiday. I love it.
It was to do with food, by the way.
Oh, was it?
Yes.
Guilty pleasure. Oh.
Chocolate?
No. Crisps.
Crisps, okay.
Chips to you guys. Do you call them crisps or chips?
Yeah, good question. Salt and lineker, or what was the other one? Cheese and Owen. Do you remember that?
Onion rings. Mine are onion rings.
All right, good. Movie.
Shawshank Redemption.
Good one. Book.
Well, I've not read a book for ages, but the last one I read was yours, Winning Attitude and Mindset.
Oh,
so
wow.
I'm going to say you. I'm going to spur you on in this one.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Wow, okay. I'm blushing.
I did a background read on you.
Okay, oh boy. Favorite female, I know this is a tough one. Favorite female athlete of all time, past or present?
Steffi Graf.
Oh, very good choice. Male athlete of all time, past or present?
I'm going to have to say Gary Neville there, Anna.
There you go.
Eliminating Philip on that, sorry, Phil.
Oh boy, now you've done it. I better edit this part out, actually.
I know.
Sports team, that's an easy one.
Man United, yeah.
Your favorite city or destination you visited?
I do love going to Australia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just the sunshine, the sports,
It's the best play. Obviously, they're playing best netball. Obviously, at the moment, obviously across Australia and New Zealand. So it's a great.
And you have your fondest memories.
Full medal there, so that's obviously always a bonus, isn't it?
Absolutely. Random questions here. Formula One or Grand National?
Grand National, definitely. Formula One's too fast for me. By the time I can't even see the car as it goes past when I've watched it. I'm like, you have to watch that on telly. I don't know how anyone watches that in the environment.
Yeah, I'd love to go to Monaco. It's been on my bucket list to go there for that race. Justin Bieber or the Jonas Brothers?
Sure. Oh.
You have to choose, Tracey.
Oh, Biebs.
Pet peeve?
Pet peeve, being late.
And any favourite quote or saying? Don't be late?
Yeah, it used to be a training session. It used to be when I was playing, a training session missed is one never got back. But I think now it's more, if you love, obviously, the job that you do, you never have to go to work. And I've realised in lockdown that's really, really important.
And final question, in your opinion, Tracey, and I know you've covered this in the last 55 minutes or so, what does it take to be champion-minded?
Oh God!
It can be one or two sentences.
Passionate.
Gotta love what you do.
Yeah, we gotta love what you do.
Yeah, Tracey, this has been a real pleasure. I mean, it's like I said, I'd love to get you on for part 2. I know a lot of listeners are going to really rave about this one as well. We've learned so much from you. Thanks for sharing what you do online as well. If our followers out there, our listeners out there, want to follow you, what's the best way?
I'm on Twitter, Tracey Nev, at Tracey Nev, and also on Instagram in the same as well.
Awesome stuff, Tracey. I'll let you get back to your day, and of course your little one as well.
Thank you very much, Allistair. It was lovely. Thank you.
Thanks, Tracey.
Thank you.
Well, there you have it, guys. I hope you enjoyed that one with Tracey. Massive thanks to her for giving up her time and sharing a little bit about her journey and her career. Remember, guys, that this podcast is available on iTunes, Amazon Podcasts, YouTube, and via my website, allistairmccaw.com. Connect with me on social media, on Twitter, at Allistair McCaw, on Instagram, Be Champion Minded, and on Facebook, Allistair McCaw page. Remember, you were made for greatness. Now go do the work. Stay champion minded.